Sparkso has the vision to build technology that helps communities connect. Their first product is an event ticketing platform that makes it easy for event producers to sell tickets directly on their brand's or organization's website. With Sparkso, it is easy to create a ticket checkout experience with multiple ticket options and add photos and videos to a customized event details page. If you're an event producer, check out Sparkso, SPARXO at sparkso.com/the color of success /. Mention the color of success during signup to receive 50% off Sparkso fees for the first event you host using Sparkso ticketing. From nightclubs to yoga retreats, brands that care about bringing people together to create great experiences, trust Sparkso. Welcome to the Golden Crane Award-winning Color of Success podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie J. Wong. I'm so excited to welcome Peter Chung here on the show. He is an artist, designer, and co-founder CEO of Foodscape, Inc. His life's work has revolved around culture, food, and technology. His startup journey has received support from Wharton's Venture Lab, Hustle Fund's Angel Squad, and thought leaders from companies such as Nike. Peter, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you, Stephanie, for having me. I'm very excited to, share a conversation with you. I really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. I'm so excited about the game and to dive deep into kind of what led you to start this company. But when you approached me for the show, you said you were a, quote, stubborn second-generation immigrant. What does that mean to you, and how has that been important to your journey?
That's a very good question. I would certainly state that in terms of just being stubborn, it is a personality trait that I seem to have. But as a second generation immigrant, you do have these moments where you kind of feel this internal conflict. And, some folks kind of wilt in terms of that kind of internal conflict, and some people kind of double down. And I guess if there's anything that it has anything to do with, let's say, just my life journey, I'm probably much more aligned with those that kind of doubled down on a few things, and was willing to bring a lot of shame to my family.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, let's just say I wasn't a great student, and my family, my father in particular, he's like a information, he's a management information systems professor for business. And, certainly there are certain expectations in terms of academia that was, in a sense, expected of me, and was a terrible student. And certainly in terms of bringing shame to the family, not being very good at that is one thing. And also to kind of have too much ego and be like, oh, I'll just be okay at something. Instead of just, accepting that and having just too big of an ego, I decided I felt compelled to do creative work, which, suffers from this thing called the Matthew principle, or the 80-20 power law, where those that have more will continue to have more, and those that have less will have less indefinitely. And those decisions that I've made didn't necessarily sit well with my family. And it doesn't necessarily sit well with, the culture in terms of first generation, in contrast to the second generation immigrant here in the United States.
Right. So tell me more about what you mean by you did creative work versus academic work, because I just see that, especially nowadays, it being such a turning point for cultural representation in the media and all that. And obviously, you're younger than me, so it's a really good time to do that. But back then, it was not like you should go for this.
In terms of work that should have been done, and the creative work, and how right now we're at a turning point in terms of American culture, and also in terms of the kinds of influence that our subcategory kind of is, in a sense, making impact in. It does require some doubt. It does require some stubbornness, and certainly I would state that you can always make this excuse by saying hey I didn't fit in, and I'm going to, find my vengeance in the world by making an impact, by doing something else. But surprisingly for me, even in that kind of modality, I found something that was much more healthy, which was like, well, Peter, you can go out and just try to prove yourself with this chip on your shoulder all the time. But also at the same time, there's probably a rhyme and a reason as to why, your family would have preferred you to have done something over other things. And there's probably a rhyme and a reason as to why they came from a culture in Neo-Confucius society that, in a sense, are rooted in certain principles that may not be that may kind of, in a sense, resist your life's choices. So that kind of experience kind of helped me have a bit more of a redemptive narrative instead of this whole, narrative like, hey, I want to go out there and just prove people that they're wrong and, et cetera. This is more like, by doing something differently and disagreeing, you can still at the same time find equilibrium. You can still find grace. You can still find compassion in conversations despite disagreements. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's an adaptive function to a couple of things you talked about, which is the immigrant mentality of are looking for stability and being able to provide for our family and give them the best chance possible. I'm not saying that's not the case now, but times have changed in terms of what that looks like and education levels. The other part is the chip on your shoulder, quote unquote, is adaptive too, right? It's like, how am I going to get through these difficult situations and have the resilience, the grit to go forward? So I imagine that, though, feeling like you were an outsider or the shame, you said, brought shame upon my family. I mean, how did that impact your mental health?
Certainly, I think like during my 20s, it was very difficult for me to kind of find a resolution regarding this conflict. And I know a lot of Asian Americans that I've grown up with, they have like this second life. They have this multiple different types of personalities that accompany them in terms of different social scenarios. And it is a very postmodern concept, which, I'm not here to really debate about that. I've just noticed that, like, for me, I was terrible at that. I'm not very, adaptive in terms of being able to read social cues. I can certainly state that reading the room is something I'm still trying to develop as a person myself. So, I just realized that in terms of just my strengths, it didn't really seem to be aligned with some of the cognitive abilities that, let's say, some of my colleagues and compatriots have demonstrated. So while recognizing that, I had to really make a choice. And when I made that choice of going into this creative domain, it's going to be a very lonely road. It's going to be a road where folks will question your sanity, question your capacity to critically think. And when you're young and vulnerable around that time, you kind of, those words really sink in a lot more at that time. And I just remember that I would kind of go into this spiral of negative thinking, and also try to escape with magical thinking, right? And certainly, I felt like throughout that time I was becoming when I was getting to the point of despair. It was more of like, I felt like I was the burden, and when you feel like you are the burden because of your life's choices, and you just trying to honor who you are as a person, and it being very contrary to what you are familiar with, it does kind of, in a sense, eat away at you for a significant amount of time. It's certainly at my height at 5'9", I was like 130, 125 pounds. I kind of was like skin and bones, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, I felt that despair where you felt like, well, if all I'm doing is just a net negative to not just myself, but to the people around me, why bother, being this nuisance, So this type of thought was very difficult for me because it was somewhere where I didn't know if I had someone to talk to regarding this. And that's probably a lie that a lot of folks kind of sink into. They kind of double down on that, saying like, no one really can understand my particular scenario. But that also has a little bit of egotism there, right? We are a lot more familiar or similar in ways than we are different, though there are very important distinguishing differences. I think, the human condition is, something that we all share and something that we should, make sure we ground our thoughts on, because certainly this type of, egotism can kind of also put you in a deeper hole than it probably, should. Yeah.
So, given that you had that introspection, how have you or how did you work on some of those internal struggles or that feeling of loneliness?
Yeah, I mean, certainly in terms of my upbringing, I'm from Starkville, Mississippi. I was born there. I grew up in Texas, East Texas, for about 5, 6 years. I was probably the only Asian kid
I was
in
going
my
to say,
school.
how was that?
Well, they got some great food in Mississippi, let me tell you.
Yeah, I can
I
imagine.
still I can't stop thinking about the cornbread there and the catfish, the batter that they use. I can't forget it. East Texas, was a very awkward time for me, but certainly something that's still in my mind and something that for me wasn't like the worst of experiences. I'm very grateful for it, actually. I certainly would state that that loneliness is something that I had to wrestle with for a long time, even when I was in the suburbs of Chicago, where there were more Asian Americans around me. I was just a really unusual person, so like even for them, I was just too much. So being able to figure out exactly what it is about me that kind of just made me stick out like a sore thumb was something that also was contrary to Eastern thought. Like one of the things that they try to let you know is that like you don't want to stick out too much, because typically if you're outside of the herd, you're typically the first one that the predator targets.
The otherness, and I think that's a condition based on how we look, and then also the cultural expectations that we have of each other in many of our communities. It can feel very isolating, especially when you're not around people that may share those similar cultural values.
Yeah. I felt it since I was in the playgrounds in Starkville, Mississippi, when my neighbors would kind of like snark and kind of be condescending. So I mean, I completely understand, though, like thinking back at all those moments, that this is probably coming from a place of pain for them as well, and insecurity. Yeah, it's definitely in terms of like the Eastern thought, it's a cycle of suffering that is that's we're kind of in a sense continuing together. And I know that like a lot of my current close friends, they're they have a very strong emphasis on ending the cycle of abuse and suffering, unnecessary suffering. And I think that's very healthy. But and at the same time, I've kind of noticed that in terms of my opinion, I think that that kind of has, in a sense, put us in a position of comfort or seeking comfort, and I think that's also something that I, for some reason, try to avoid for whatever reason. But yeah, I mean, the loneliness and the otherness, we can go on and on and on, and I can certainly tell you this: the self, I've noticed, is an endless pit, right? You can just go on, and it sometimes can, but sometimes that kind of introspection is necessary to understand the root of many of the feelings that you are either avoiding or ignoring, because that will bubble up, in
Yeah.
in surges, and I've definitely witnessed many of those throughout my life, and I'm not immune to those things as well. But Yeah, definitely. I call it what we call critical feeling, just trying to, in a sense, allow myself to feel it and then acknowledge it. And then instead of reacting to it, responding to it. And it's easier said than done, right? I mean, like, you can just talk about it but practicing it is, yeah, extremely difficult. And it's also something that does come up, in terms of like leading, a startup with folks that I've never met in my life. We've only Zoomed through. We're a true COVID startup. Haven't met like 95% of the people that's in my team right now, ever. And yet, for me, just like, being able to, understand how that kind of distance can also be an opportunity to, reach out and to connect with folks. And I certainly would state that my time figuring this out in terms of just, working with the otherness is something that I'm still trying to understand, and also trying to not have my emotions get the best of me. So I think it's a lifelong cycle that I need to, work on. And critical feeling is something that I'm trying my best to promote within the organization, and to make sure that, in a sense that us as Asian Americans can sometimes put that on the back burner a bit too much.
Yeah. And I think leading by example, and it sounds like reaching out to friends and having this framework to fall back on. I mean, how did you actually develop that framework though to then apply to the company? Because it had to come from somewhere aside from just introspection, no?
Oh, well, I mean, certainly there was going to be very obvious feedback from people saying, Peter, you're talking in a very flippant manner. And my wife being Peter, you're acting childish here, and, you should and you could do better.
Mhm.
And I think I'm very lucky to have a team of folks that are not afraid to let me know when I could do much better. And I think that kind of feedback is very necessary. I mean, the journey is really trying to find and understand what the product is and how to make a business out of that. And it's a search that nobody really knows at the moment. And we're in this journey of the unknown. And if you're going to have certain biases that that you just simply feel more comfortable with without actually testing it, then yeah, it could be the very thing that undermines your entire journey. So I think that kind of that kind of process does kind of force you to be very upfront about your weaknesses and also your strengths. And I guess there's a certain kind of mercy to that. You get to make your mistakes, but you better learn from it, or else the journey will end. But I certainly would state that for me, critical feeling was probably the last thing that I still am working on that. And I certainly want to continue to grow upon that. And where did I learn this? I would certainly state that, like, with critical feeling, it's a statement that I heard through thought leaders that I respect. It's not necessarily like an Adam Grant kind of thought leadership, though it does sound very similar to it. But because, like, actually, Dr. Wong, I'm very curious. Like, what are your thoughts about emotional intelligence?
Oh, I was just going to say that when you were saying difficulty reading social cues. So, not to get too off topic, but we also, in my staff at the hospital, we studied the book Emotional Intelligence because um, I thought it was just so important for us to understand each other and build relationships. EQ is definitely it's something that's kind of spouted as important. However, how do we build up that skill? And part of it is being able to understand the various dimensions of it, take some assessments and then share it with other people and see what their feedback is. It takes a lot of uh, challenging of one's ego and having to put that aside because even people with very high EQ have things to work on, right? And I think that if anything, I wish that were taught more in schools, because that soft skill is just so important in whatever business you do. I see a lot of clients in tech that are coming out of college or their mid 20s, and they are promoted to these management positions, and they're not necessarily taught how to manage people or how to manage their own emotions. And so that really has that trickle down effect. I think it really is a key to organizational health, if you think about it.
Yeah, I certainly would state that for me, like that weakness is something that I knew that would sometimes like make my workers feel just a bit, and my co-founders very like uncomfortable at moments. And when we do share conversation, especially when we're trying to seek truth and trying to figure out what the next best thing to do is, if your emotions like gonna, if you're not, in a sense mindful, at least, because I never really believed in like control per se. I felt like control led to like repression, and then repression would lead to, these like waves of, behaviors that, kind of is muddled with a different, whole history of conflicts that were not resolved. So I was never a big fan of that, actually. And I never really felt that the need to control was something that was actually a virtue. But, for me, I also am pretty intuitive, or I tend to try to, I obviously, work with my gut more than my head. So when I'm doing things, but the thing is like, yeah, I felt that like, for example, when I was going through depression, one of the things that I would really struggle with was thoughts of paranoia. And that was from what I understood from my time thinking about that experience was like, there was a sense of self-hatred that was there that would kind of, in a sense, spark these thoughts of paranoia, as if I am an unacceptable human being and people who are more normal and civilized will come after me to take care of me. So for me, like, that was something that really undermined my capacity to operate day to day. And I learned through talk therapy, through community, because I had a friend who was struggling with his own battles in terms of mental health, and we were able to kind of be there together while I was also kind of receiving medical advice from my psychiatrist as well. So for me, like having that kind of approach really did help me not control per se, but be more mindful
and manage. I think it's manage and
Yeah.
regulation, which is what you're talking about.
There we go. Yeah. So
I don't know.
yeah,
I just get paid for this. It's fine.
No, I don't. I obviously don't have the words here. So thank you. Yeah, I realize it's managing. Yeah, it's not control. It's just like you're learning how to manage that. And yeah, I mean, if you're going to have strong emotions, there are ways to manage that as well. And yeah, I mean, when you are in a startup, kind of setting, you are going to have these very high highs and low lows. So certainly, I've come to recognize how essential that is, and I'm very happy that I get to, I guess, in a sense, talk about this with you from at least my perspective so far. Yeah,
absolutely. So we've alluded to this startup. We've alluded to kind of the things that you've launched, but could you tell us more about what is your company, what's the mission, and especially what the game is, because it is just so cute.
thank you. Really appreciate that. Yeah, right now I'm doing a game called Bobaface. It is a game where it's a match 3 game that allows you to play our game, and if you get ranked at the end of the month, you get to win free boba on us. And also our game comes with an animated series. So as you play our game, you get to learn more about our cute characters and their story behind that. I am very proud of the work that we've done. We have folks from Savannah College of Art and Design, Cal Arts. We have folks from various backgrounds working on this purely because they want to see this out there in the world. And they wish that they also were able to enjoy this when they were in high school or in middle school or beyond. So
It's so cute. And they are just little bobas that are animated and just so adorable. I mean, my businesswoman side is like, oh my gosh, I could see you launching plushies and t-shirts. And I'm sure, your team has thought about that. But there's just so many layers to the games. And like you said, there's an actual tangible reward that someone can get for playing it. So, but tell me more about why Boba.
oh, that's a very good question. So I actually started off with brunch. My senior thesis was about brunch as yeah. I was simply proposing that brunch is culture, and my body of work, my body of paintings, were simply a proposition that is something to be taken seriously. Um, and from that experience, I found out while I was working as a graphic designer in North Jersey that the majority of mobile gamers are women. And me being this, pimpled teenaged Asian boy playing Nintendo 64 in the basement, that literally like
Blew your mind. I can just see
it,
the emoji. I should just put it there.
yeah. I kid you not. I went on the MTA, looked around, and folks who are playing like very intensely with their phones, it wasn't even close. It was predominantly women. And when I would, just, do a quick peek, it was either a Sudoku, crossword puzzle, like Wordle, for example, or match three games. And
What is MTA?
the New York subway system, yeah, or
Oh,
public
okay.
transport, yeah.
I was like, what tech thing is this?
I'm
Got it.
sorry, acronyms. Yes, that's right. Buzzwords. That's definitely not a good thing to continue. But yes, certainly. Just being on the public transit in New York, I would just look around, and it wasn't even close. It wasn't, and so I was like, "Wow, where was I this whole time?" And whenever I would talk about my brunch thesis, a certain subgroup of folks would get their eyes would light up, and they're like, "Oh, I'm like, I love brunch. I can't believe you like. I mean, you did work about that," and I gained over 50 pounds, doing research about brunch, and I'm still recovering from it. And I would state that I thought we should bring those two worlds together, and my team got accepted into the Wharton Venture Initiation Program Community Incubator Program, and there we did some market research. We found out that 72% of female mobile gamers are also brunch goers. And that kind of caught the surprise or caught the attention of the folks at the program. We got accepted into the Venture Initiation Program Accelerator for the fall of 2019. We tested out the idea, and then eventually we were able to launch the product on the Google Play and Apple's App Store. Long story short, we launched it and found out that people who want free brunch with our game, almost none of them claimed their free brunch. And I was like, okay, what's working, what's not working? Clearly, if they're not claiming the brunch, what's going on here?
Yeah, what do they want to claim?
Exactly. And then I was like, so what happened? And then they were like, oh, but me brunch, I love brunch. I like the idea of brunch, but like me planning brunch is kind of a hassle.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really brunch as often as I would like. And certainly, just being prepared for that. You go out for brunch. It's a thing that you experience physically. It requires some kind of level of commitment. And
the pandemic hit, so that made it even more challenging.
Very true. Very true. So I asked them, then what do you do on, like, let's say a weekly basis? And what are you into? And surprisingly, or not, they responded by saying, well, I'm a big fan of mochi donuts, BTS, and boba tea. So I was like, okay, well, clearly you're not a millennial foodie. What's going on here? Let me learn. And we thought it through together as a team, and we were doing some research about boba. And clearly there was it's not like a frozen yogurt thing that just simply kind of like was a flash on the pan. This is something that actually grown substantially for years on end. And it seems to only continue in terms of its interest and its profitability. Starbucks just recently announced that they will be experimenting with Boba Pro, tapioca Pro balls with their drinks. So it felt like there was something happening here that I kind of stumbled upon. Mm-hmm. And then in the question, and another thing that we received was like, Peter, I like your brunch characters. I don't understand what it got to do with the game itself and winning free brunch. And I recognized we were missing a story to bring it all together and making those characters' personalities sing. So I had to kind of, in a sense, tell the team we need to start making an animation. Like, and they're like, Peter, like none of us made an animation. What are you gonna do? So I had to kind of just out of nowhere start an animation studio from scratch, and was able to release this product. We've been live for like about 11 days now, and certainly the folks that have been playing this very actively. The response they've been very receptive, very understanding, very warm, and we're not right now. We're in a position to make a decision. Are we going to continue with the marketing, or should we make our own boba shop to supplement this particular product? Mm-hmm. So we're right now thinking that through, and we're very much excited to see how we can continue to build upon what we have. We have a product here. We definitely need to now shift in terms of how we can turn this into a business, and we're definitely working hard to make sure we continue. Every month we push out new levels, new animations, and we're very excited to start having our own plushies and etc. But ultimately, what's motivating all of this is this is Asian American culture. If we think about Asian American culture, like we think of Aquafina, we think of Simon, and we think of folks that have definitely made an impact over the years, like say for John Cho, for example, Cal Pan. So we certainly have we're having some flow of some influence in terms of Asian American culture, but I just felt like there's still this significant void here.
Mm-hmm. And Simu passed out Boba at the premiere, right, of Shang-Chi. So it's like there's all these aspects that it is really part of the culture of like, hey, let's grab a Boba. And in fact, the funny story is when I went to Vegas for BTS, I met with Jessica Wu, who's the bento box queen, and I interviewed her maybe about over a year ago, and she was like, she bought us boba. And so I think it is just really a part of just the culture of hanging out in cafes, of being able to that's something that can happen real quick. You can pick it up, or you can sit around, and the choices and the flavors and all these shops have popped up in the Bay Area, like everywhere. And so I think that's it is a very culturally relevant aspect. However, like you said, hey, if it hits Starbucks, people are gonna know about it even more.
And for me, that's like very exciting because I grew up folks trying to in a sense emulate hip hop culture, assimilate, and certainly trying to essentially demonstrate the masculinity through that, for example, or it just felt like there was this like not enough material for folks to really get a sense of like, oh well, these are some of the contexts in which I can work with in terms of what it means to be an Asian American man, so because it's either Jackie Chan or Bruce Lee, when I was growing up, and everyone would ask me if my mother's Connie Chung, so I mean, hey.
If you met my mom, she'd be like, F that, I'm not Connie Chung. Who are you talking to? But that's my mother. And I'm even thinking about, hey, if you want to hit up like the younger children demographic, they love avatars, right? They would love build your own boba, and even though the different bobas have stories, I think that it is very important to have that customizing of one's character. But at any rate, I mean, I could go on all day with things that are popping up in my head. But you mentioned, looking at demographics, looking at things, and I think that's really important is research, right? Is like not just assuming what your audience wants, but actually diving deeper and asking the questions. So I guess throughout your entire journey, what is one question you wish someone would ask you, and what would your response be?
I guess in a sense, I like to talk about just the human experience, a human condition. And I guess one question I've always been thinking or wrestling with is like, what is, why is there suffering? What's the point? And what is the what is the purpose of suffering? And why is it even a thing? And it's something that for me, I've definitely quote unquote looked into Eastern thought in terms of like why we have suffering because of like, let's say, desire, right? But like for me also, like me having this like this insistence, this being compelled to make things, was something that also made me look into like, let's say, Western thought, where I was just like, well, there is a desire to create, and perhaps that is a desire worth suffering for. Mm-hmm. And I think I that's something that I'm still really curious about, and something that also makes me wonder: is it possible to strip away meaning without suffering? As you can see, if I'm in the creative domain, then meaning is going to play a big part in whatever it is that I'm trying to do. And despite how uncomfortable it might be, it seems to also be this very generative space for meaning to emerge, and it's something that I will definitely like to always entertain in terms of having conversations with folks around me.
Well, I think what you're talking about is very higher level, which is philosophical existentialism. And, I think that whole aspect of finding meaning is very important in creative work and in general in life. It's kind of like, how much are you willing to sacrifice to have that distress tolerance for something that you really, really want and think can help people and change the world? And I am your demographic in terms of female BTS army, like hardcore BTS army. I do play a matching game, and it's funny because my girls are like, is the Boba game up yet? And I was like, yes, we're gonna do this. But I've been playing this one game for several years, and one of my pet peeves about it is like there's not enough levels that come out, and so you can't really gain stars or build your little floors or whatever. So I think there are all these things that what do games do, right? It's like, one, there's escapism, but other things is just like with BTS, there's a deeper meaning to being an army and supporting the things that they put out there, which is love yourself, talking about mental health, figuring out how to manage struggle, but also success, because with success comes higher expectations for self and by others.
Yeah. I can rest assured we will continue to push out new levels. And certainly it's a new competition every month. So we definitely want to make sure that it's something that's new every month. And we're certainly trying to make sure that every week someone has the capacity to win free boba just for signing up.
Yeah, so, I mean, kids are going to love it when you put out plushies as a prize, like guaranteed. So, or even adults. I mean, how many BT21 plushies do I have? You don't even want to know, Peter. Like,
let me write this down.
You won't even imagine. Oh, and I just love plushies in general. And I had the shout out to Kat Chung, but she I didn't mean to bring that up, but she does the webtoon Catloaf, and I interviewed her and ended up buying her plushies to support her, but also just because I love the characters, right? Like there's this aspect also of Asian culture of liking stuffed animals, and people might think it's weird on the outside, but that's like a part of like getting just enmeshed in a culture, right?
I like to play in words. Let's say, yeah, I would say that in terms of the cuteness, the kawaii, I have a lot to learn, and it's a new. I mean, certainly, I'm not a very, yeah. Let's just say I have a lot of room for growth in terms of getting in touch with my feelings, but certainly believe that this is a very generative space that I definitely want to pay homage to. Make sure that the work is paying respects to the folks that, and also just appreciating who the folks are in terms of the work that we do. And I certainly want to make sure that, also the company reflects the values as well, that I think would be life affirming and help and definitely like, just healthy for our customers and our customer base. But I certainly would state that, the levels, and the time that folks put into in terms of playing games, I do really think about that in terms of, folks that kind of might spend just way too much time. So I definitely want to make sure that we are going to make sure that the product is not going to compromise the mental health of our customer base. And that is something that I do really want to pay a very close attention to moving forward. So just sharing this conversation with you, I just wanted to say thank you for just giving me the opportunity to share my mental health story, because it is something that has fueled me into where I am today and the work that I'm doing right now. And I understood that if it wasn't for those difficult moments, I probably would not be the right person to even consider crafting a product on behalf of a particular group of folks that I never heard or never experienced, and to have the compassion and the capacity to listen is something that would have never happened if it wasn't for the road to recovery, which I experienced.
Yeah, I mean, once you find, and it's an ongoing process. I don't want to say once you get there, but I think meaning making is a lifelong process, though. And when you're thinking about that in mind, things will fall into place. I'm a firm believer of that. And just finding things to be passionate about. And it's not finding just one thing. Things can change and, sprout out in different directions. And I think, it's so admirable and brave to be able to talk about these things. And I think this interview in itself, to be able to associate it with parallel growth in your company, is really important, so people can also see like, hey, he is doing the hard work to understand me a bit more. I mean, especially with your team and everything. I think just they know that if they can give you hard feedback and you can take it, I think that's a really big indicator that you're working on things, because there's plenty of people who get feedback and don't internalize it. So that's a huge thing. But where can people download the game? Where can people follow, what you guys are up to? Please let us know.
Yeah, please check us out at thebobaface.com. We just type in the word Bobaface at the Apple App Store or Google Play, and you'll be able to, begin playing our game and also just checking out our story. If you're interested in, let's say, the NFT and Web3 space, it is something that we are very passionate about being leaders in this particular space. We do believe we have a unique approach to really kind of make the real life applications of blockchain much more accessible. I mean, if we can make blockchain accessible to high school students and folks that play our game, then I think we're moving forward in the right direction with this technology. And we definitely would love to have your support, and we definitely would love to continue to serve this wonderful group of folks that we are, trying our best to listen to and to appease to the best of our capacity.
Thank you so much, Peter, for spending time with me today and sharing all things Boba, but more importantly, about the mental health journey to getting to this place in your life. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Wong. This is it was very therapeutic, but also at the same time, it was something to I really enjoy sharing this with you, and it means a lot to me as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the Color Success Podcast. Listen, like, subscribe on all major streaming platforms, YouTube, IG, and if you want exclusive content, you can join our Patreon. All links can be found at colorofsuccesspodcast.com.